Thank you for joining us, or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Amber Viazang, and I am here in Portland, Oregon with Elizabeth Worlein.
Good morning or good afternoon. Thanks for joining.
And we are also joined by our colleague Megan Davenport, who's actually joining us from Denver. Hi, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with all of you today.
So as we get started, I'm going to hand everything over to Elizabeth and Megan in just a moment. But first, some quick housekeeping. We would love to make this as interactive as possible and get your questions as they come in. So to do that, you're going to use your chat area. So if you take your mouse and you go to the top of your screen, you'll see a little drop down and then click on the chat. I know I was able to, we're being joined by Brenda from, looks like Tampa, and Samantha from Topeka, as well as others. Tracy's joining from Illinois. So thank you for joining us. So use that chat area to send us any questions. Also, this is being recorded, and we will have this recording available for you in about 24 hours. It should come to your inbox. We'll also make a YouTube, and we'll have a blog. So this will become a resource you can come back to, which is fantastic. Am I forgetting anything?
Let's get underway.
Let's do it.
Well, thank you again for joining us. I'm so glad to have the support of our professional development team as we help you kind of just reflect upon this last academic year and get ready for success in the next academic year. To do that, we're going to share today 5 tips for planning your curriculum process. This is actually great timing, I was just thinking, Amber and Megan. We just concluded last week our Leadership Institute here in Portland, Oregon, where we have schools join us from around the world. I mean, we had schools from South Korea to Ohio. Yeah. It was great representation. Paraguay. Oh my goodness, see all sorts of backgrounds, various initiatives or values at the schools, but it was so interesting because whether the schools were beginning or redesigning or maybe just revamping, kind of evolving their curriculum process to the next level, even regardless of their initiatives. I had some schools that were developing new ELA curriculum, and how do we maybe pilot a textbook while mapping curriculum? We want to provide curriculum mapping as a pathway to professional development. So it's so many different entry points, but there were a few best practices that we shared with them that we felt like could be shared with anyone, just so that you're sure to plan a sustainable and successful long-term curriculum process. So these are tried and true tips from our 25-plus year history with consulting with schools here at Rubicon. And so we hope that this allows you to maybe redesign, revamp, or even if you're just starting out with your curriculum process, start on that pathway to success. So let's talk about the structure real quickly. We're going to share these 5 tips. We'll share the tip, give a few thoughts or examples so you can take some notes, and then we'll share an example or model from the school so you can see how a school that we've worked with has taken this and maybe made it into their own for their curriculum process. As Amber mentioned, we will have Q&A throughout, so please chime in that chat window with your questions. And at the end, we'll have kind of an open forum. If you'd like to save your questions for the very end, we can certainly circle back to any topics. In addition to this, think about, too, if you would like some more one-on-one or personalized consultation. If you just leave your name and your school in the chat box, we'd love to follow up with you and talk about how these 5 tips maybe translate to your curriculum process. All right, well, let's get started then with tip number 1. I kind of find it the most foundational. So it's very simple, but we're going to spend a little bit of time on it. So like I said, it's kind of the most hearty of the tips. To design any successful project or process, there are 3 main factors or elements that we want to consider. We really need to keep these 3 different elements in agreement to make sure that we can produce a project or a process on time and on target. So this is actually founded in project management techniques. I recently completed a course in project management and found that a lot of what we were doing with our schools is directly related to these tried and true best practices in project management. So we've tweaked these 3 elements a little bit more to fit the world of education. The elements are, first, the tasks, what the project or the process will look like, and what will be done, essentially the outcomes. The time, that includes timelines, deadlines, and duration of tasks. And also resources. I think specifically for education, this comes down to the people that will be involved, the costs that will be needed to complete the task, maybe professional development funds or additional resources or training. These three elements all determine the quality of your project or your process. I think most importantly from our work with schools, we really find that the time and the tasks is the biggest sticking point. Just simply think about what are the tasks, what needs to be completed, and how much time will it take? How can you maybe reallocate time, whether that's professional development time or meeting time, to help maximize the time allowed to complete these tasks and to maximize their impact? Time is that kind of biggest factor. It's that key ingredient in what we've seen with schools. So think about really how much time you have. Again, where can time maybe be reallocated or reassessed? And do you have any wiggle room in how long a project or a process can be turned around? That just allows for a little bit of flexibility because we always know something is going to come up. Typically, in project management, these three items or these three elements are displayed as a triangle. It always has to stay an equilateral triangle so that if anything is to change, maybe your time changes, as you were just saying, something comes up, we need to adjust the tasks and the resources accordingly. So when you think about one element here changing, think about how it affects the other and ultimately your quality. We need to adjust all those elements accordingly. So throughout your curriculum process, no matter what it looks like, it may be as simple as the diagram that you see here on our screen. This is just a generic kind of high-level bird's eye view of a process, no matter your entry point for your curriculum work that you can use. These three elements are going to always be revisited. Planning is essential to a successful and sustainable curriculum process. It could be just as simple as this diagram that you see. It could be more complex, but it really is essential. Let's take a look at one school and how they developed a timeline and an outline of the task to take. This is coming from the Park School in Massachusetts. They very clearly outlined, as you see here on their document, the exact hours and dates that teachers would have for those specific tasks, from creating and writing their unit calendars to beginning to actually work on their curriculum maps. We have a fantastic past Spark webinar, as well as a blog article that summarizes the story from the Park School, and Amber is sending that out via the chat window right now. So you can go to the chat window and open up the two links that are being sent out so that you can read a little bit more about how the Park School went about thinking through the time and tasks that they had and putting that on this document to keep them accountable and on target. As a note, too, we are going to have a document at the end of our session today that has all of the case studies that we'll be presenting. So if you can catch it now in the chat window, fantastic. Otherwise, we will have a document with all of these in one easy place for you to access. Moving into our second tip. Once you have drafted a plan, consider the most important and relevant parties, might be known as your stakeholders, that will be involved in this process. It's a great way to test the validity of your plan, but also to ensure that we're meeting everyone involved in their needs. Otherwise, we have found that you can sometimes give people exactly what you think they want or what you think they're asking for, but maybe not what they really wanted or really needed. A stakeholder, just to confirm our language here, is a person with an interest or concern in something. If you have a stake in something, it's usually like you have an investment. What is that usually for teachers? Time, maybe professional development, their work that they've created over the years. So it's always something that's very valuable to them. If we want them to buy in to our curriculum process and our plans, we want to make sure that we're considering their needs, what they want for their professional practice, and making sure that that's brought in to the time, the tasks, and the resources that we're outlining. There are a few steps that you can take to, in the world of project management, it's to do a stakeholder analysis, but I think it's just in the world of education just to think about everyone involved and consider their key interests. The two main factors that you can use to think about this analysis or this degree to which we want to gather groups' interests and make sure that it's reflected in our plan is to think about their power and their interest in the project. So you might think first about just what are the main groups of people that are going to be involved in this process. It's likely teachers, administration, community members, being parents and students, and then go through and think about those groups' power and impact. Do they have high power or low power in the execution of this process? What's their interest in the outcomes or the results? So you might place then just simply dots on this little matrix here with those with high power, high interest, or maybe high power and low interest. So here on the matrix that we've created, I placed first a quick dot there with low power and low interest. When thinking about your curriculum process, this might be like parents or community members. They're obviously going to be interested in the end results, but along the way of this curriculum process, they're probably not going to have too much sway. So we want to make sure that at the end of our curriculum process, maybe we use a public site or something like that to share our curriculum, but we want to just at least know that they're a stakeholder along the way and probably won't change our plans too much. You may be able to guess who has the highest power and interest in these type of planning. Usually it's the teachers or those that will be heavily involved in the curriculum writing and review. This is the group, anyone with high power and high interest. We want to make sure that we list out very quickly the benefits of your curriculum plan and process, and think through some incentives that will get them on board. Incentives that will directly relate from your projects and its outcomes that relate to their interests and their key needs. Again, that goes back to the buy-in piece and just making sure that you're thinking proactively about the needs of those high power and high interest groups so you're sure to get them on board.
And I'll just jump in really quick. The Park School example that we linked in, one of the things that they used to, get staff buy-in was that they used Atlas very early in the process. They used those reports for professional development work in enduring understandings and essential questions. So the idea is if we're going to document our curriculum, we want to make sure that it's for a useful purpose, and they did that early on, which is really effective.
Absolutely, because they know teachers want to see that this just wasn't get it in, get the curriculum in. There was a greater purpose to it. So they took that vision, you're right, Amber, good example, and they showed that bigger picture right away. This is a great resource that our wonderful PD team put together. It's called the Faculty Bunch. It's a great video. Amber's going to link it in the chat window right now so you can, again, bring this up maybe in a separate tab. This will also be on that summary document that we'll send to you. But it's a little, if you will, look into the various perspectives that might be at your school, thinking about those teachers that those characters that we all have on our campus. It allows you to think of the different types of stakeholders on your faculty. Within the blog article that's shared with this video link, there are some ideas that you might consider for communicating and engaging those various types of teachers at your school or your district. All in all, take away from this that before communicating your project plan and publishing it out there or starting action, we want to be sure to do even just a brief stakeholder analysis so that way we can avoid any potential obstacles and risks. With that, we're going to head into tip number 3. All curriculum processes, and again, taking a perspective from project management, all projects have risk. Many are unforeseen, but we can usually do a pretty good job of knowing at least where we might encounter some speed bumps along the way. So before rolling out your plan, taking action, it's good to test your plan against a few key risks or to at least consider some models that might help you determine when those risks will come up and how you can get around them. So first and foremost, think back to those factors: time, tasks, and resources from tip number 1. And think about maybe some assumptions you might be making with those 3, making sure that we're, again, foreseeing any potential roadblocks with those foundational elements. We sometimes run into schools saying, you know, we're going to have this open-ended work time. Teachers will do it on their own time. Or they maybe schedule things at times of the year when we know that there might be testing or other key initiatives are really heavily the focus. Think about maybe changing the timing, changing the scope of your project just to make those adjustments so that we're not making any assumptions and can change the other tasks and resources factors accordingly. If you want to know more about analyzing risk, kind of like how you can analyze your stakeholders, you can think with just 2 simple questions. Really, what will be the impact of these risks or these obstacles if they come up, and what's the probability? We've found it really helpful to use a couple of change management models to help us understand when risks might occur and how to ensure that our plans foster a positive track for change. It's kind of important to know the emotional and the psychological factors behind change in our projects just so that we can better kind of foresee some of these obstacles ahead. One of those key models that we use is the ADKAR model, and Megan actually is going to share a little bit more about that with us.
Yeah, so the ADKAR model is a really nice way to build on tip number 2, which is thinking about the people involved. ADKAR is a change management framework, so it's really focused on the people side of a change, which we know in education is always a challenge because our educators have so much on their plates that taking on something new is a tough proposition. So ADKAR really is a linear model that encourages you to think through each of these different stages when you make a change. So starting with awareness, that's really helping teachers, educators, everyone involved understand why this matters to your school or district. So certainly an important message, making sure people are aware if you're starting a new curriculum initiative, why that's important and how that will impact teaching and learning. And then we move through each stage towards getting teachers on board. So desire is once teachers, we'll use teachers as an example, are aware of the need for a change or a new curriculum process, it's really speaking to why that matters to them as individuals, because we know teachers have a lot on their plate. So just knowing that something's good for the school isn't necessarily enough to be personally motivating if the teacher can't understand how that helps them as individuals. Then we move towards knowledge, which is building the skills to be able to do the work. So in an example of a curriculum process, maybe that's learning how to use Atlas, maybe that's learning how to write a unit plan. And then action or ability is the hardest one, I think, because that's where you take it from, great, we had a PD day and learned how to do this. Now how do we make this something that we can actually take action on in our day-to-day? Do we have PLC time set aside? Do we have early release days set aside? When is this work supposed to happen? Who's supposed to be doing it? And what are those kind of day-to-day actionable goals that make this a part of our life and not just something we do once a year? And then finally, the last is reinforcement. So as this process is going, how do we make sure that we're continuing to recognize what's going well? So this framework does a really nice job of helping you plan for obstacles and helping you foresee obstacles that may come up by going through a linear process to stay on track.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're so right, Megan, about that transition from the awareness and the desire, just building that foundation with the knowledge before transitioning to that action step. It's a big jump, but one that we can certainly plan for in our curriculum process, just making sure that foundation is so strong. We have a school that took if you will, a year zero of their curriculum process to do just that. They saw that there were going to be some obstacles with building and skills and engagement with their teachers. So they created a multi-year plan to write and review their curriculum, but they knew that they needed to do a really slow rollout. So they set aside an initial year. They called that a year zero or a prologue, just to thinking through those foundational elements and knowledge and desire that they needed to build within teachers to help them buy into this curriculum process. So they have their year plans here in vertical columns, as you'll see, going across the page. And take a look at their key topics or their key milestones from year to year. This was mapped out into Atlas, so they had a course, if you will, for each of their years, and then they planned out their key topics by unit, if you will, too. We'd be happy to share this example with you via your own Atlas system. We've built this for a number of schools, but know too that this is just something that can be customized and brought into your Atlas system. So take a look here at how year zero, how they just really spend time assembling a team, determining the progression of their curriculum mapping, looking at their calendar for professional development, dedicated time to map, and sharing out their vision with teachers right from the beginning and making sure that that was threaded throughout their curriculum process over multiple years. You may have noticed in that last tip that they really took time to build and cultivate a team. So that's a good lead into number 4 here, tip number 4, which is to build a team. You may have noticed that our projects revolve around an outcome, but also the people, whether they're involved in helping us plan or maybe check potential obstacles and even helping us execute the plan. A project or process is never completed by just one person. In fact, you as the curriculum process leader or a specific project leader are mostly just delegating tasks to the project and to the people, i.e. your team. So it's really important for us to think about how we can leverage a team to help us through this curriculum process. There's a few key tips we would like to share with you today about building your team and helping and having them implement and engage others in your curriculum process. And so that you can develop a team not just into a group of people, but really into a highly functional team. I would say that in addition to having a multi-year plan with your time, your tasks, and your resources outlined, the team is the second most important factor for a long-term and viable curriculum process. Consider your team as having multiple perspectives and a diverse representation. So you might bring in various levels, you might bring in different disciplines, levels of leadership, grade levels, just so you're sure to have everyone's voice around the table. You might think of especially the roles and responsibilities of this team. Are they just simply your early adopters? Are you having them assist with leading Atlas? Are you having them assist with leading your curriculum process or the curriculum PD? What are their expectations and their role and responsibilities? As you bring them into the project, think about this image here with kind of their trajectory for what their role and their responsibilities may look like and how they may change over time. At the beginning of your curriculum process or implementing this new phase, it's going to be mostly on you as a leader to get them on board, communicate key ideas, communicate key outcomes, maybe even bounce some ideas about your process or about your project off of them just to make sure, again, it's valid and sound. And then ideally, by the end of your process, they are highly functioning. They are producing, and you are simply just kind of sitting back and taking that 30,000-foot view, making sure that all the objectives and targets are going to be hit on time and on target. There's within this, too, a few key phases to think about of your team and how they might come together to kind of get to that ideal end point. When we initially bring our teams together, they're at the forming stage. And that's, again, as I mentioned earlier, where you want to come together with your team, define their role, define their end targets, and define their responsibilities. So it's really about setting clear objectives and making sure everyone's on the same page. You might also think about setting team norms or meeting norms just to include the cultural and the values that you would like to see spread throughout your team. These phases, you'll see they rhyme a little bit, so they'll stick well in your mind. The second phase of teams coming together and building for success is storming. That's where they identify the things they're going to change and how they're going to do it. And that might be, too, where you really dig into your plans for your process a little bit further and think about exactly how they're going to do it. Do you have the right people for the job? Is there anyone else we need to bring in here to make sure that we have the right team for the right job? As they continue on, you're starting to let go of some of the leadership. You're starting to give more to your team, and that's where your team is norming. They're finding their rhythm. They're establishing relationships among themselves. They're building confidence. And finally, they're highly functioning. They're performing. You are keeping that 30,000-foot view, making sure that other time and task and resource elements are included, but they are really leading and taking charge with your curriculum process. We have a fantastic, just short video from a school in Tennessee. Catherine Coons shared how helpful it was for her to have a core team at their school and how it gave momentum to their process. I think it's always great to just hear it from educators, you know, really what worked well for them at their school and just quick tips and tricks. So this video is a great, just short listen. In it, you'll hear her say that she found it really helpful to start with a core team. They trained them up, had them work on some initial curriculum maps, and it was like this positive PR that spread. The team started sharing out how helpful it was, kind of a little bit more about the plan. And word caught on that the middle school wanted to join early then, and the lower grades then wanted to join even earlier. So she was able to think about, all right, how can we adjust our time and task? She's more at the process level, while her team is really leading the charge with the actual materialization of their curriculum development and alignment. Within the video that Amber just sent out, there's a great blog article summary too, so take a moment to read or listen to that after today's webinar. To our last tip, it puts it all together for us. It's just to come back to your plan often. Whether things are going well or whether they've gone off course, it's important to set milestones where you're going to come back to your plan. Make sure it's in a working order. Even if you have to put that on your timeline, time to check in on our plan, make sure that it happens, that you have checked in on your vision, you're checking in on your team and those important project factors or project elements with your time, tasks, and resources. Come back to the vision, why you began this. What were your key goals or outcomes long term? Check in with your stakeholders. Are you still meeting their needs? Is there anyone else maybe who's moved in, maybe a subset of teachers that's high interest and high impact, and we need to think about maybe adjusting our plan or sharing some incentives with them? go back and reevaluate your risks or obstacles using the ADKAR model or other models from our blog article that we will share out in that summary document. You might just want to check in with your team, as I mentioned, on how they're functioning, where are they in their phase, that trajectory that we shared. Maybe see, too, if they need any professional development, if they need further skill, support, or refinement. Do they have trust in you as a leader? Just check in and kind of take the temperature of your plan. We mentioned this earlier, having a timeline or some kind of documentation of your plan, and again, making sure that there are milestones where you're going to come back and make sure you're on track and you're on target. There's really nothing more powerful than putting the pen to paper. So making sure that you have set those milestones where you're going to come back together, reevaluate, likely with your team, as well as just on your own. And I would say, too, with our Rubicon team, make sure we're included in those conversations so that we can consult with you further about building that buy-in and making sure your tasks are on target. Actually, communicating this plan that you'll put on paper with teachers is a great way, too, to build that buy-in. Teachers or those key stakeholders will see that there is a vision long-term, it's thoroughly thought through, and it's something that's going to be addressed over multiple years. So it's a great way to show really the impact that your process is going to have and how it will have a positive impact on your school or district. We would encourage you to consider, again, maybe it's just a simple timeline, or maybe even some kind of document like an FAQ guide that you can share out with your teachers, sharing this vision and when you're going to come back and recalibrate as needed. The Portledge School recently worked with us to create a video, and in that video they share a little bit about their vision and their goals for curriculum mapping, but they also created a handbook, an FAQ guide for their curriculum mapping process, and they shared this with teachers so they knew exactly what the long-term targets and visions were, as well as when they would come back and recalibrate their plans. We'll send out this link here in just a moment so you can listen to their curriculum process and how they're using it to drive collaborative conversations. Thank you again for joining us for our 5 tips for planning your curriculum process. These 5 tips, no matter where you are, again, reevaluating or maybe redesigning your curriculum process or just starting out, are going to help set you up for success. I've mentioned this a few times, but just want to say again, we're here to consult with you along the way, ensuring that your process is sound and on target, and your system, really, your Atlas system, is aligned to those curriculum goals and needs. We want to make sure that it's customized to fit your long-term plans. As you mentioned, there will soon be a document sent out to you with the recording, with all of the various resources that we've shared today, as well as a few extras. We welcome the chance to go through those with you, as well as other case studies and examples, and for the chance to work with you on your 2017-18 curriculum projects and processes. You may also consider joining us for our summits and regional workshops, as well as our leadership institutes that I mentioned in Portland, Oregon, where we really dive into other examples and practices for planning your curriculum process. We always find that our participants walk away very informed and inspired from those events.
Absolutely, and so much of this, it feels like, is figuring out what are the resources that resonate with kind of your leadership team and style, the culture of your school, and so it's really about, continuing to find and flush out those resources.
Exactly. So we're happy to stay on the line for a few more minutes. We wanted to keep this short and sweet so you can take these tips and run with them, as Amber said, making them your own at your school. But if you have some maybe general questions about these 5 tips, we'd love to just kind of have an online discussion about these, as well as offer up the chance to just collect names in schools if you'd like more one-on-one follow-up. We have for all of our schools a personal consultant that can help you plan your curriculum process at your school or district. So if you leave your contact information with us, we'll be happy to follow up with you and take these 5 tips and apply them to your curriculum process. Please use the chat window at the top of your screen with that conversation bubble icon to share any questions that you have.
So I just posted a comment from Trish Rigg. Shout out to Trish, hello. She said, one thing I found so helpful at the coach's professional development was the video chart about the various generational issues. Ooh, I think I cut that off. Megan, do you want to comment on that?
Yes.
On kind of through the generational issues with schools?
Yes, so I'm finding a link to a book right now that I will put in the chat window in just a moment. Jennifer Abrams has done a lot of research on being generationally savvy. I've heard her speak at ASCD a few times as well as various other conferences. So if you go to a lot of ed conferences, you'll probably see her name on the list. But she had a really nice focus that was saying, there's a lot of talk about different personality types and different learning styles, and those are all extremely important, but one that's often overlooked is generational differences. And sometimes we communicate differently based on our age and generational differences. So she really emphasized the importance of recognizing some of those communication differences and planning PD so that you're reaching your target audience. So an example offhand that I remember is, and Amber, maybe you can help me remember without pulling up my slides. Certain generations hate role play, hate it, will be totally turned off if you pull that up in a PD and say, I want you to practice by doing a role play. Whereas other generations, I believe it's baby boomers that dislike role play. Whereas other generations, younger generations tend to say, actually, I love role play because it's a good way to try something out while I am in a safe environment. So just something to think about. That lens is kind of a fun one also.
Right, especially, when we look at the who makes up our staff, we have such a wide range of personalities, which is great, but also 2 generations, and just having a lens to think about reaching people is a really good, good thing to do.
Absolutely. You have that communication plan that might be your baseline, but then you think about those special tweaks you need to make for the representation at your school.
Absolutely. Well, as we are kind of wrapping up, it doesn't look like we have a bunch of questions coming in. Megan, is there anything you might add?
I think the thing that strikes me every time I look at process management, project management, change management, any of those planning things, is that when you step back and look at it in a bubble like this, it's really common sense. Of course we should take into account what time we have. Of course we should take into account what our team thinks and feels and making sure everyone's on board. But where the rubber hits the road is where it gets pretty difficult. But looking at it in isolation is pretty common sense, but when we get into the nitty-gritty, these are complex processes and projects with lots and lots of things involved, and certainly not this nice isolated bubble where everything makes sense. So the more we can go back to tips like this that kind of bring back those simple questions that we need to be asking, the better off we are.
Absolutely. So true. And I think, Megan, it's just one of those things, too, we can always come back to, no matter if we have changing leadership or changing teachers that are making up our school, it's important just to come back to these foundational elements to make sure we're ready and prepared for the next academic year. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to sign off now, but again, if you have any questions that you'd like to go over with us, we are here throughout the summertime. We'd love to work with you, so please follow up with us via email. We'd love the chance to chat with you and talk about your curriculum process here for the next academic year and beyond.
Yeah, well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for framing this and putting this together and sharing. And again, I know a lot of times when we hear great ideas, we have to let it soak in and percolate. And so as all of you are kind of soaking all of this in, as questions come up, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. And we'll look forward to connecting. Great. And Megan, thanks for joining from Denver.
Yes.
Stay cool.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.